And welcome back. We get started with our biggest story for today. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, is once again in the eye of the storm, this time over troubling discrepancies in its audited financial statements. The Senate Committee on Public Accounts has opened an investigation into the company's books, citing over 210 trillion naira in unaccounted revenues across several fiscal years. According to the latest Punch report, the Auditor-General's office flagged extensive irregularities, including missing remittances and unauthorized deductions, prompting fresh questions about transparency, accountability, and corporate governance in Nigeria's most critical revenue-generating agency. The revelations have, at this point, sparked outrage across civil society and industry stakeholders alike, particularly given the NNPCL's recent transition to a commercial entity under the Petroleum Industry Act, PIA. Many had hoped this shift would usher in a new era of openness and professionalism. Instead, the current audit gaps not only threaten investor confidence, but also raise the specter of systemic rot within a company that accounts for the bulk of Nigeria's foreign earnings.
Yes, indeed. So to help us make sense of the numbers, the processes, and also possible consequences, we're joined by two expert gentlemen here. Biodun Shomi, a respected public affairs analyst with decades of experience. And of course, we also have Mr. Obiari, an investment banker, executive and development economist, whose deep knowledge of fiscal management, public finance, and reform policy will provide critical insight into the matters here. Gentlemen, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Now, it's like,
good morning.
Judith, do you know what we have here? These two experts? Okay, wait till the end. But let's get started. First off, gentlemen, let's start by asking an overview what you thought about the discrepancy, 210 trillion naira. How much of a dent, how much of a problem does that cause? Let me start with you, Mr. Albieri.
I'm not surprised, and I just chose to honor this invitation, just to, we will keep on sounding like broken record. There's nothing that the Senate has revealed that is actually new. And 210 trillion, we are shouting as if we are outraged. Here in Nigeria, 2021, the former GMD of NNPC, Melekari, told us gleefully on Arise TV that annually we will lose over $22 billion of our crude oil resources to thievery and inefficiencies. And you discover clearly that in 2014, May 2015, if you look at the records, we are producing 2.4 million barrels of crude and condensate every day before 2015. From there, it nosed up to 1.1 million barrels. 210 trillion is nothing compared to the volume of criminality and monumental corruption at NNPC. Because if you multiply $22 billion by the 8 years of Buhari malfeasance and the larceny, it will give you an idea of what we're talking about here. But why is the Senate sounding, I was even shocked, why is the Senate sounding as if it's a new thing? The Senate has the power to right the wrong. The Senate has the power to set the record straight. The Senate has the power. It's not enough to just trigger Nigerians by saying, oh, 210 trillion naira discrepancies. I tell you today, if we want to reform NNPC to make it to become more productive, like the Petrobras that does $121 billion turnover every year, $36 billion profits every year, $44 billion taxes and revenues, taxes and the royalties to the Brazilian government, and then assets of over $174 billion. And NNPC is actually started before the Petrobras, bigger than Petrobras, but assets of $51 billion because we practically steal everything we produce in that sector. If we want to reform the NNPC to make it as per the Petrobras, we know what to do. And a simple thing, unbundle that house of corruption. Look at what the Brazilians did. They are not less corrupt than Nigerians, but the Brazilian government did the right thing. They knew that public sector corruption will continue to destroy their oil and gas sector. What it was simple. They unbundled it, sold 72% of the shares of Petrobras to deep-pocketed private sector investors, about 4 groups, retained only 28%, overhauled the whole place and injected transparency and accountability, and they stopped the shenanigans that we are seeing in the Senate.
Okay,
so we know what to do.
I like that
you
touched on the reform angle of things, because that's where I wanted to go to, and I wanted Mr. Shoromi's take on this now. We, in a way, well, not in a way, it was actual reform. I mean, it went commercial, and one would have thought that this would bring accountability to the NNPCL. But it doesn't seem to be the case. This didn't surprise you in any way, did it? Or what's your take on the entire issue, Mr. Shomi?
I think when you talk about corruption in NNPCL, there are very few Nigerians that will be surprised about that. Even Mr. President won't be surprised. We all know that NNPCL is part of the Nigerian conglomerates and owned by the public sector. And we all know, we all go to offices, even with civil servants, we know what we go through. So there's a measure of corruption going on everywhere within our country. The difference is that we have a high level of tolerance, for corruption. Everybody waits for their own opportunity. And I suspect that's partly what my brother is alluding to. But I carefully look at the Senate and I bear in mind the House of Representatives grilling of Otedola, which led Lawan Farouk into trouble. We exactly go the same way. Because when you look at this issue, the first thing that will shock you is the level of unreconciled income and expenditure. You're talking of 210 trillion. But we have the Senate committee, the House of Reps committee, to carry out oversight functions on a year-on-year basis. How did they allow you to get here? We should first ask them this very question. What were they doing? Were they sleeping over? Because this is not a product of 1 year, 2015 or 2017 to 2021. I mean, were they sleeping? So what were they doing during that period? Why is it that they didn't pick up these issues, even without the auditors picking them up? So what were their duty when they talk about oversight functions during that period? That is the first problem. The second problem is dispassionately look at the issues they are raising. Some of them, I begin to ask myself about the quality of people representing us. For instance, there is the issue of NAPIMS. The NAPIMS needed 9 trillion naira. NNPC ended up with over about 67 billion debt that accrued a subsidiary, make 9 trillion naira profit only for NNPCL to be in deficit, as if they are not aware of the issues around fuel subsidy regime over that period, because they actually needed to give us the figures and explain how that happened. They didn't focus on that. Another thing which I also noticed is their basic understanding of how accrual accounting works, because NNPC is practicing accrual accounting, not cash accounting. In accrual accounting, you are allowed to accrue for expenses, and also your income will become income receivable. Over a period of time, this has to be resolved, before you can classify it as bad debt or money that actually came in. Now, what you see is they are raising issues around, why did they sign off the account? When they know they're still in the process of reconciling it, then they do not understand accrual accounting. And there is also law in this country. Auditors, auditor statements, there is a deadline for submission. You cannot miss it. What auditors can do is to qualify that account. They will qualify that account, and then in subsequent report, they will address all those issues. So for me, raising the issue, why did the board, approve the account when it was under reconciliation, shows that probably they do not understand accrual accounting. Maybe they are thinking about catch
In summary, you're
accounting.
saying these work in tandem. They happen at the same time, accrual accounting.
No, I'm looking at the competence of those who are representing us, carrying out the oversight function.
Right,
it's quite very important. Otherwise, you will never get to the end of this, and before you know it, some other things have exchanged hands, and then the issue will die away.
Right. So oversight committee, auditors, then that means if this was a publicly traded company, right? Because this is Commonwealth, right? If this was a publicly traded company, it's most likely going to be penalties and sanctions. How come we're not seeing that?
Okay. Let me come in here. You see, there is this erroneous belief that that we attach limited NNPC does not actually mean that it's operating like a limited liability company with corporate governance in place. NNPC is just a glorified corrupt entity within the public sector with LTD attached to it. NNPC is owned by Ministry of Finance Incorporated and Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated, and these are public sector groups. And the same corruption, like you mentioned, are still there. I'll give you an example. The Nigerian liquefied natural gas is an entity that has consistently over the last 18 years paid dividends to Nigeria. It's owned 51% by the private sector group, Total, Shell, and the rest of them, and 49% by the NNPC or the federal government of Nigeria. You will never see the MD of Nigerian liquefied natural gas going to Senate or House of Rep to be grilled or this, because there's an efficient board in place, corporate governance in place, recruitment, everything. In fact, the Nigerian liquefied natural gas is not even performing up to 65% of its nameplate capacity because of inefficiency at NNPC, inability to supply them with the natural gas they need to blend their trains. The truth is, we know what to do. I get angry whenever I see these shenanigans in the Senate. It's right, and most of them don't even have the competencies to actually oversight NNPC, because if you see the issues they are raising, it clearly shows lack of understanding. All these gragra they are doing just to see how these guys can come and settle them and everything settle down. If we want to do the right thing, NNPC, the Senate and the rep has the powers. We will unbundle NNPC. Petrobras did it. Emirates Oil did it. Even Aramco did it. Aramco at the time had to do IPO. And they say they want to go and list on the floor of the exchange. If they are listed on the floor of the exchange with Minister of Finance and I want to invest. I mean, like no same investor that will put his money there. The only way they will do this, it will work. Very simple. And I will bear the people it again. Privatize NNPC. Sell 30% of the shareholding of the federal government to 3 core investors, preferably local investors. Sell 40% to Nigerians, both at home and in diaspora. List it on the floor of the exchange. If we have 70% of the shareholding of NNPC in the hands of private sector investors, 3 core deep-pocketed technical capital investors, and the 40% Nigerians, and shield it from this normal shenanigans at the National Assembly, I bet you in 1 year, Nigeria has crude oil reserve of 37.5 billion barrels. Proven reserve. Brazil only 15 billion barrels. Brazil does 2.3 million barrels consistently every day by Petrobras. Brazil does annual turnover of $121 billion. Brazil and Petrobras has an asset value of $171 billion. Annually, they record $36 billion profit. They paid the government $6 billion dividend. They paid $44 billion annually as tax and royalties. This side of NNPC, there was a time in this country they were limiting 3.5 billion barrels and $1 billion into the federation account. That was why it was easy for NFLA, despite the shenanigans with Buhari, to be able to even maintain Naira at where it was. That was why it was easy for Sanusi to defend the Naira. Right. But under Buhari, the thing came down from $3.5 billion to less than $1 billion. And we're not asking questions. And remember, even when we talked about subsidy was paid 100% between 2010 to 2015. Buhari moved the petroleum price from 87 to 145 to even to 600. Yet we don't have money remitted into. And the Senate were there. They saw the number came down from $3.5 billion to less than $1 billion. It never occurred to them that there are a lot of holes and criminality going on there. Right. If these guys are sincere, by now, if a person is being prosecuted for 10% of corruption, Melekari and some of the guys there should be facing times 10 what the person is facing. And we know the guy is busy resting somewhere. Right.
So I said the same thing that he was saying.
With this
Doctor, I have to ask you, right? Because now this is Commonwealth, like I said earlier. This is the Commonwealth of Nigerians. Whether or not it's publicly traded or it's LTD, one thing is certain: if foreign direct investment is slowly dwindling, right, or non-existent at this point, and our budget is pegged on the revenues that would come out from NNPCL. When we're looking at a deficit such as this, or a discrepancy such as this, it begs to ask the question how we look for foreign direct investment.
The truth that I've said it to anybody who cares to listen. We don't need the white man or anybody bringing investments.
If you summarize that, because I really want to hear this.
I said this. I'm an investment banker, and I was privileged between 2007 and 2010 to work with Nigerians in diaspora. Neither Africa, neither Europe, neither America. And I can tell you something that will shock you. We can easily attract $50 to $100 billion investments from Nigerians in diaspora into Nigeria, into the critical sector of our economy, oil and gas to be precise. But we need to put in place transparency and accountability within that system. We need to unbundle the NNPC. Let me tell you, if the federal government is sincere, if the Senate, they are sincere, and they apply the Petrobras principle, the Emirates Oil principle, even the Aramco principle, and do the same thing we did with Nigerian liquefied natural gas. If we decide today to do an IPO of $20 billion and do offer for sale of 70% of the shareholding of the Federal Ministry of Finance and Petroleum Ministry, which is the NNPCL valued about $51 billion, undervalued. If we decide to do it today, we will unlock over 40 to 50 billion into this economy, and I'll tell you it will be oversubscribed. But as long as there are no transparency, there are no accountability, most investors, both foreign and local, will not invest. Ask yourself this question. How did we get down from, if you look at CBN records, in August 2010, we are doing 2.8 million barrels of crude and condensate every day. Did the oil wells dry? New investment did not come in. Why are the likes of Shell, Total, Chevron going to Angola, going to Cote d'Ivoire, not coming to Nigeria where we have the biggest population, the biggest reserve, the biggest resources?
And
because they know the truth is because inefficiencies and corruption, and we don't want to do the right thing.
Just a second, Mr. Shobi, did you have any addition to add?
Yeah, I do. I think what we need to focus on is quite very clear to me. Look, by 2015, we were doing 2.2 million barrels a day. Now, between the reference period for this very report, the production declined, from 2 million barrels a day or 2.2 at times, down to as low as 800,000 at a point. Now, I have listened to the argument. I read the argument of the Chief Financial Officer of NNPC, and I must say that he's new in office, so there's no doubt about that. But he linked this 210 trillion naira to issue of joint venture calls, that is 1.3 trillion, 103 trillion, on expenses, and 107 trillion, on income receivable, leaving a balance of, if you're able to reconcile it, of about 7 trillion naira. But the issue is this: if you have expended 103 trillion, on joint venture calls, why was our oil declining during that period? Why is it that the oil is not going up, production is not going up? It's quite very important. We need to know what happened to the oil, because joint venture call, what it simply means is NNPC has a certain percentage, to contribute, and the multinationals or the oil majors would also contribute their own part, and you both invested. So what happened to the outcome of that investment? Is it that we didn't get any oil from it, and we kept throwing in money to the extent that we expended 103 trillion, of our country resources on that, only to end up with low production? Still, we are yet to recover till now, and we're still being told they are reconciling this account. It's not just about the figures, it's also about the expected output.
Before we run out of time, now I know Mr. Obiari has told plenty about how this could be solved, but when it comes to restitution, what advice do you have? Do you think that, first of all, we've lost this 210 trillion, there's nothing we can do about that? Whether it's recoverable or not, that's a dead-end question. But how can we plug these gaps that we're seeing in the system currently?
Obviously, the NNPC financial system seems to be faulty. There's no doubt about that. Number two, NNPC is yet to be fully a limited liability company. So, therefore, the boards are still being appointed, both for the subsidiary and the main parent company, by the federal government. So, therefore, they still have this public sector mentality rather than the private sector mentality. Dr. Odameka has already spoken a lot about what can be done, to save the situation. But before that, before the solution, I also will advocate for a forensic audit of NNPCL, Jimobazi type of forensic analysis, so that those who are responsible for any misdemeanor or any financial infractions within the NNPCL will not simply walk away and live in luxury while the rest of us, the whole country, is suffering the pains of their actions. So the fact of the matter is, this issue should not just be left with the Senate. We need a full audit of NNPC itself, a forensic audit of NNPCL. It's not enough to tell us that, look, we have reconciled the account, the figures. What about the output expected from the joint ventures? Where did it go? It's important.
Right. I mean, it's also very clear here that one of the arms of government who have for a long time has turned a blind eye to this whole thing is the Senate as well, right? Because if there's an oversight committee, clearly there's an oversight committee on the Senate on oil and gas. If these auditors are coming out, they should flag, you know, the NNPCL, whether it's their board of directors or the person, the MD or CEO in charge, to come and face the Senate, because this is a Commonwealth issue. If you're telling Nigerians that 210 trillion naira is missing, one thing is certain, you know, the box has to stop somewhere, and somebody has to hold everybody accountable, and it has to be the Senate, right? But I mean, gentlemen, I must say thank you. Just very quickly before we go, your final remarks, very quickly. I'll start with you, Doctor.
Oh, you
my final remark is very simple. We know what to do. All these things you see Senate inviting them, giving them 1 week, let me tell you, something will go under the radar, and they'll be settled, everybody will be okay, and the rot continues. We know what to do. Go the Petrobras route, onboard NNPC, do public offerings, 70% of the federal government holding NNPC, 30% to 3 identify core investors with technical and financial capacity, 40% to Nigerians, do IPO of $50 billion. That, first of all, will lock about 45-50 billion into the national treasury that will help us to achieve exchange and price stability in the longer term, and then list it on the floor of the exchange. If you do this and introduce corporate governance, shield it from public sector shenanigans like we are seeing in Senate, and make it function like Petrobras, like Nigerian liquefied natural gas, I tell you, in the next one, you will look back and you wonder, where did this?
I wonder, because Nigeria there's always a problem with Nigeria. Nigeria always happens. I wonder if that can actually work. And I wish there's enough time for us to, you know, poke holes at this theory.
As president, I will do it within 6 months.
There you go.
Very quickly.
Align broadly with Dr. Nemeka's submission.
Right.
There's no doubt we need to go Aramco, Petrobras ways, and that's exactly what, you know, drove the transformation of NNPC to NNPCL, you know, in the PIA passed in 2021.
Right.
So we have not fully implemented it. So you begin to ask yourself, 2021 to 2025, why would it take 4 years to transform NNPCL?
Right, gentlemen, I must say thank you. Mr. Biodun Showemi, he's a respected public affairs analyst, as well as Dr. Nemeka Obiariri. He is an investment banker, banking executive, and development economist. Gentlemen, thank you once again.
I just want to say I would hate to be in a class debating team with the two of you if we ever were in class together. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.